it gives us maybe a starting point. I don't know if you're. It's probably a little bit about your own work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for all of us, yes. I mean, I guess we can share what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And give you a little précis of my background, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, that would be good. I know a little bit
Okay.
from having met you, but yeah, it might be an idea just to do that if everybody's okay with that. Good evening, Peter. Nice for you to join us again.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
So yeah, so if you wanted to, Martin, yeah,
I'll keep it.
I'll
keep it brief.
We haven't heard from you before. Most of us have been on a few times, so
okay.
Yeah, the floor's all yours, I suppose.
Righto. Right, born a farmer's son, spent the first quarter of my life farming, moved away to higher education, into engineering, spent a lifetime in engineering. I've been retired now 7 years. And I suppose when I was in my 30s, I started picking up spiritual things and dowsing things. Went on a night course in Derby. I can't remember when, it would have been early 80s probably, which soon ended because the man moved away, but he really got me into dowsing properly. And I've enjoyed dowsing ever since. And so the first few years I would not do a lot, but I'd mainly be dowsing for ley lines because there are some coming through our village. And at my father's farm, I could roam the fields and track where the lines went, just out of passing interest, really, and not a lot more. Went through a phase of getting into healing a little bit, trained as a Reiki healer, worked for a few years with the medium, as a sort of wrote down a lot of what she was doing, and I learned a lot about the spiritual side of things. So just an all-rounder really, and never satisfied with any of them. Went on various professional workshops. There was a lot of channeling going on, very impressive channeling I attended, and now I think I understand what that is. It's not something that I want to spend time involved in because of what I believe is the source of the information, or the source, I suppose, personality, you might say. So I've gone through a lot of those hoops, and in the last 20 or so years, I've been specifically dowsing without reading books, just dowsing with a pendulum to reverse engineer creation. Because all my life has been spent by taking things to bits and fixing them for people, including people. So that's where my healing side comes in a little bit as well. So I've developed a very unique perspective on how I think things are made, what we're made of, what we are, who we are. And I've got a very rounded view of lots of things. There's nothing out of my scope of interest, whether it's subatomic physics, you know, all right through to what life is and what we are and why we're here, how we got here. Everything you want to know, I've studied it somewhere with my pendulum and have my own take on what things are and what they've been and how we got here. Doesn't make me right. It's just what I've built up with my own technique, if you like. And again, it's just pendulum dowsing and question asking, building up a framework. It's like building up a 100,000 piece jigsaw when every piece is white and no two pieces are the same, you know. And you build patches up of knowledge and other patches, and after a while you suddenly find this bit joins with that bit, and the picture starts to build up, and which gives you some degree of confidence that there is a logic behind it all that makes the information kind of connect. But that's also put me in a position of being very alien, because the box I live in is outside of anybody else's I know. And so anything I try to mention on the subject will be taken in the context of whoever's listening's own framework of understanding. So Nigel Twyn mentioned this the other day, you know, it's very much dowsing, and your understanding of it very much depends on where you're coming from. So it's nice to hear what other people are doing. It doesn't make them right or wrong. It doesn't make me right or wrong. It's everyone has a personal view of what they think they are, who they think they are, why they think they're here, and what they should do about it. And I guess that's where I'm coming from. The long-term aim would be to provide a new understanding, particularly for health and well-being, for a new type of medicine, a spiritual medicine, rather than one which uses medication per se, and a better understanding of how we work. But unfortunately, I don't think that'll ever take off, because I don't think anyone's got close to where my concepts are. And I don't know how I can get anyone on, far enough away from what they think is their box of reality over to mine. I'm kind of way out there on the other side of Saturn, you know. But anyway, I'm here. That's in a nutshell, as a scrambled egg for you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, that was very eloquently put and very enjoyable. I suppose if there's any, is there anybody got any questions then? I suppose I don't mean to put you in the spotlight, Martin. It just so happened it's happened this way to this evening, and as I say, we had no questions, so it just you know, if you're happy with it, then
can I ask Martin the question about whereabouts on the wackiness spectrum he is, about his spiritual healing? Right, I'm going to give you a benchmark.
Okay. And
you'll say how close you are to that benchmark of wackiness.
Right, okay.
At Veda Austin's talk in Exeter, October the 1st last year, she said how, do you know about her work?
No,
how
I don't.
She takes a sample of water and she puts a couple of millimeters, a layer of it in a Petri dish, and freezes it for 10 minutes, no more, so that the water's at that in-between state between ice and fluid. And she finds that if she's programmed the water with an image or a thought or a word, the water talks to her in pictures. She calls them hydroglyphs.
Okay.
And just as the example that she gave, her children had started asking if they could eat the ice, the ice that was showing this hydroglyph, the image.
Yes.
She wondered what learning curve she was being taken on. And then her husband picked up on it and asked for the water to be programmed with the word or the essence, the energy of ayahuasca. And then he ate the ice. The Vida got an image, a hydroglyph, a repeatable hydroglyph. And her husband ate the ice, ate the hydroglyph for about 10 days and started sleeping better. And I don't think she told the audience this, but I think there were other ayahuasca effects. So if programming water and freezing it and eating the ice, is water healing, how wacky is?
No, that's not wacky at all. Have you come across Jack Benevist?
No.
I think he's died now. He was a senior medical researcher in France, an advisor to government and everything, and ran one of the top clinics in France. And one of the students that came to work for them, although I've lost the image of who you were, one of the students that came to work there said he wanted to experiment with homeopathy. And he found, after various experimentation, about how homeopathy was working. And they worked to such a state that they could put every type of homeopathic medicine into a computer as a digital reading and program pure water in a file anywhere in the world, and people could take that as a medicine. So the idea of programming water, whether it's the way the lady did it through freezing or whether it's through vigorous shaking, it comes back to the fact that water, people think water has memory, but it isn't actually memory. It's what I call temporal thought, where temporal thought is a structure of thoughts to make a pattern or an image, if you want to call it an image. So not only water, but water is the one that people are getting into now, is that you can program water, which then makes you realize that all the water that you drink out of the tap already carries lots of programming from its own history. And you've no idea what that's doing to you. Some people like to get water and then they put their hands over it, or however they cleanse that water to get rid of any imagery that the water might be carrying. So it's you've got to think of it from two sides. You've got to clean the water you're going to drink if it bothers you. And you can program it like a homeopathic medicine. And you described the lady's method of doing that. And it obviously worked for her husband, but it's not wacky to me. It's something that I've got my own terminology for, and it's temporal thought. It's like thought. Do you know what a thought form is in spirit talk? Anyone? Thought form?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think David's different to the rest of us, but
okay. Well, yeah. a thought form is when a thought is attached to a spiritual entity, and that can be then attached to by anyone who it's supposed to, or who happens to pick it up. So in marketing terms, if you have to have 2 Weetabix for breakfast to be somebody, then that can become a thought form, and wherever you go in the world, you can pick up, oh, I've got to have 2 Weetabix because that's what you have to do. And it's one of those things that sort of the marketing people know about. Well, if you take that from the spirit level, which that is, down into the material level, that is now, it becomes a temporal thought. So this is what you're talking about. You're talking about programming water with a temporal thought. And the lady's method of doing it was by mental imaging while it was at the verge of freezing, I guess.
I think if Frida was here, sorry, I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so I haven't read that. She uses water to give her answers to historical questions. And I can't. Well, I mean, she drowned as a teenager. Right. She was missing for 3 hours, and it was the most weird story involving. Well, she remembers being told afterwards that some dolphins, 2 dolphins, were dead further down the beach, and they were cut up, and she eventually, at someone's suggestion, asked water how come she survived this drowning, and got an image of a dolphin frozen. So that speaks to me of historical memory.
Yes. Well, a combined thought is like a how-to thought. If you want to say, how do you do something, somewhere in your system, there will be a memory of how you do that. How do you stand up? How do you speak? And all this sort of stuff. You've got a memory somewhere of how to. So it's a kind of a how-to memory, but at a very atomically small level, or it's at a molecular level, to be precise. It's held in molecules. And of course, water is a molecule. Now, that structure of how to, I can't say that it doesn't involve some degree of memory, because it's remembering how to do something. So there is a crossover, but I don't think it's an intelligent thing. It's an instruction in some way, or information in some way, which the mind can tap into. That's as far as I can really tell you on that. I'm not only, it's just inside my box, that's all.
I'm a bit worried where I'm taking this.
Don't worry.
If you ask me questions, but as part of your reading, have you read Plasma Theory?
There's a
Plasma
new
science.
I read the recent one by Dr. Robert, Temple.
Yeah, you have.
Yes, I've read that one, and that's very much lines up with my ideas. Yes, and my ideas go further than that book, but the book certainly aligns with. There's nothing in the book that I go, that's not right. It's in the right place. Does that help?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just mulling over why you're stopping short of using the word intelligence for water.
Yes. It's a difficult one, and I'm not sure I've got a stock answer for that. Intelligence is something which is active, and if it's prompted with something, it will look at its own understanding of what should be, and it will respond accordingly. That's what I would think intelligence is. Where awareness is slightly different. Awareness can be aware of things, but not necessarily respond to them. So it's down to semantics as well, because what do we mean by intelligence? What do we mean by life? I'm sorry, my vocabulary for words is dried up at the moment. It'll come to me again in a minute. The more I look at it, there are various slices of the cake which have layers that build up to give us what we call intelligence. The word will come to me in a bit. It's just not coming for a minute.
No, it's all right. I know exactly how you feel. So for you, if a being was aware and responded appropriately, that would tick the box for intelligence, would it? If it reacted appropriately to what it knew?
Yes, but I can't say that I have a definitive idea of what I would describe as being intelligence. It's something I've not considered as a word. The word I was looking for just now was consciousness.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Now, in my science, and I call this a science because I'm reverse engineering what is, so I call it a science, and we talk about having 5 senses or 6 senses, but my science is 8 levels. It's 8 layered. So my science says we must have 8 senses, and the highest of those 8 is consciousness. Okay, so we can only be conscious while we're awake by that reckoning. So when we have an outer body experience, or we're dreaming, or whatever, when we're not conscious, we are only aware. So awareness and consciousness can be separated in that way. So when we go to sleep, we lose all of the senses, including consciousness. Yeah, and so it kind of fits. So then you've got awareness. Now, where does intelligence come into awareness? I'd have to give that a bit more thought to give you a sharper answer, I'm afraid. You're right. I mean, thought is thought. Thought compares more than one sense. 2 senses combined together are compared and made into a thought. Thoughts can be compared with each other and make to more thoughts. Now, when you've got a thought that you want to act against, is that intelligence? Or is intelligence when thought understands something? I'm not sure I would go on that yet.
Interesting, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that. Explains something very subtle and esoteric and nuanced extremely well.
Anyway, that's on one of the edges of my box of reality. Everyone else has gone quiet now.
I think they're listening intently.
Perhaps.
Martin, have you put any of your thoughts in writing to share with people?
I have been for 5 or 6 years planning to and attempting to start writing books. I had at least 3 books in my mind initially to cover the scope of the work. And every time I try to do that, I go, oh, I've not done enough research in that area. And off I go down that rabbit hole. And a few months later, I think, well, I have to go back to the book again. And I get there for a couple of hours and I go down another rabbit hole of research into different areas. So yes, I would love to. Yes, I've tried to start, but I have a huge doubt about whether I ever will, because if I liken myself to the person that invented the atomic bomb, was it right that that became public knowledge? Because what I know or think I know is more powerful than anyone's ever dreamt of, and I wouldn't want people to have that if I didn't really trust them.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So to put it out in a book that people I don't know can go and read, that would be a big ask for me.
So it could be almost as difficult having a group of people to sort of discuss your ideas and share their thoughts on them.
If I was to run a workshop, for example, which I'd not got in mind, I would need to vet everybody going there, that I knew who they were from a spiritual point of view, to feel that they were up to understanding it the way that I understand it, and not half-baked and go off with some cockeyed idea about things. Does that help?
Yeah, it makes it very difficult to share it.
I've had what I call spiritual friends and healer friends. All of them, bar none, won't talk to me on the subject anymore, because to them, I'm talking gobbledygook, because I've gone beyond what they consider they understand. And they're people that I rated and I've learned from along the way. But they're stuck at their level of seeing things.
Mm. Have you tried talking to dowsers as well as healers?
Well, no, other than I've been to some dowsing conferences over the last 10 years probably. And that's why I'm here now, just to hear what other people are doing and thinking. Not that I want to put my ideas out, I just want to know where everybody else is, really, to give me some sort of reckoning point or counterpoint.
Yeah. I've certainly found that dowsers are very open to the wackiest things that I can come out with.
Well, I'd like to think they are. My early, I tried about 30 years ago to join the Nottingham group, and at that time they were very much into energy lines and archaeology research, of which I don't have a problem. But anything to do with healing, it was like, you know, they crossed their fingers at me and said, "Get out!" You know, that's voodoo. You know, we don't do that. So I've been a bit cautious now. When I've been to some BSD conferences a few years ago, it's clear that there's a lot more shift towards a healing aspect, and that includes some spiritual aspect as well. And I'm in the spiritual SSIG of the BSD, but I don't talk like this to them, because they have their ideas about spirit and God, and they're not my ideas, and I don't want to spoil their party by going in a different direction.
I don't think you should worry too much about spoiling people's ideas.
No, never hold back.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Take your point.
David, that's for sure.
Anybody else have a question?
Yes, Martin. You said you'd been through the works and did some channeling, and you now understood where that was coming from.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that you think channeling is coming from people's recorded information rather than outside of them?
No, the channelers that I've seen that have been what I would say world-class channelers have been channeling what I would regard as people that have lived long ago. And those people are getting an extension to their life experience through him and learning about the future from him via him, while still being deceased from thousands of years ago. And they give all sorts of, they can be very humorous and very entertaining. As an entertainment, it's fine. But to listen to them guide you, I've yet to see one that I would trust, because they're doing it for their interest, not for yours. As an audience, you're being entertained, but there's nothing there of information value that I've ever found.
Okay, so I went to an event with Colin Fry, and he kind of came onto the stage, and the first person he looked at was me, and he picked up an incident from about 6 months before, where I had been stood in my bedroom looking out over the garden, and he describes the garden, but as I was stood there, I felt that there was someone in the room, and I turned and I could see the shape of a person in the room, decided they were there to help me, so I didn't attack, and turned around and carried on looking out the window. But then 6 months later, so it was him alive, me alive, and he was describing the situation that I had.
So was it he that had been with you in the room?
Yes, must have been.
So was he astral traveling?
Astral traveling, remote viewing, astral projection, a little bit of, because I could kind of see the outline of him. So it's not all about communicating with the dead.
But was he channeling in that case? He might have been being mystical, but was he actually channeling? When I say channeling, I'm talking about bringing forth another entity, another consciousness, or intelligence was the word used earlier.
No, it was just he and I.
Yeah. I wouldn't class it as channeling.
No.
But I'm not sure what you would call it.
Interesting. That's what I would call it.
Oh, yes. Always interesting. Yes.
Another point you say about thoughts. Oh, yes, these kind of balls of energy of thought. What did you call them? It was there a minute ago.
Thought forms?
Thought forms, yes. Yeah. Ancient witchcraft's use of, they appear out the top of people's heads, and they have shape and form. And a lot of the time, they just kind of drift off into the ether, but you can direct them and use them.
Yeah. And you can destroy them if they're harmful as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So which form of healing do you, I mean, you say about spiritual healing, but isn't spiritual healing mostly working with frequency and vibration?
Yeah, I've got a name for mine, but it's a secret at the moment, but it isn't one you'll have heard of. And it's not like any healing modality that I've come across. Mine is very different and very, very wacky and varied, so that I take to pieces the problem part, whether it be in the body or in the spirit or beyond spirit, because I go beyond spirit to source as well, to see where something is wrong and, where possible, correct it. Now that can be all manner of subatomic connections and with mental connotations. It's very hard to describe it in this situation here.
But it'll all end up to do with the frequency arriving in the here and now and in the body.
Frequency, if you want to use the term frequency, yes. But I don't usually bother with that term much.
What, you use another secret term? I mean,
no. As I say, it's so far out of the box. I don't have any terms of reference that I can. So it means this or that or the other. What I have reverse engineered, if you like, is an idea of how creation began and what it's formed of and how it's structured and how that structure filters all the way down to the structure of what we call our human condition. And the ailments that we suffer or can suffer can depend on very many different levels in that structure having a problem in them.
absolutely.
Now, so what I try to do is locate where the problem is and address the problem for what it is. And it's not always that there are two problems the same.
Well, there's lots of dowsers doing that. And you go into the Akashic records or go down people's timelines to see if it's coming down a timeline, or some people go for curses and hexes, and so there's many and various ways of accessing problems other than, you know, what we're eating or what we're doing to ourselves with repetitive strains, or the emotional damage we can cause ourselves by creating detrimental energies within our body. I don't think you're alone in researching that lot.
I'm with you on all of that. Yes, I completely agree. I just have a different way of seeing it. That's all.
Well, so do I. But I actually see it kind of most of the time.
Yes.
It's but most dowsers will access that through pendulum or rods or bobber or just the whatever dowsing reaction they get, they will go there and ask those questions.
Yes. I feel drawn to say something, but I'm very nervous to say it.
I was right. I'm used to it.
I mean, for the whole audience as well. In my work, I've come to the conclusion that there's more than one type of person. The world is full of people, and as far as the world knows, all people are made equal. They're all the same. But spiritually, in how they're constructed, is not. And if you're talking about, for example, past lives and bringing forward difficulties from past lives, that is perfectly true for the people that have past lives, which is less than half the population of the planet. There's far more who do not reincarnate. And it's understanding how they're structured and how they work. And their view of spirit and God and spiritualism and healing works for them and not for everybody. So guess what I'm trying to say is one size doesn't fit all. And you go to any healer and say, oh yes, they can do this, that, and the other healing, but they will have to tell you that there are some times when it doesn't work. All healers will say this works most of the time, but sometimes it doesn't work. And they don't realize is if it's a different type of person they're dealing with, their modality of healing may not be applicable. Does that make sense?
Every person is a slightly different type of person because we're all at slightly different frequencies. So what works for me might not work for somebody else, or simply because we're at slightly different frequencies and we have kind of different abilities. Some are more able to jump out of body and do astral travel and that kind of thing, and some people are stuck in their head, and it's something that I have been questioning the last couple of weeks. Read dowsers. Do some dowsers, I mean, we are from probably before we're born, we're recording everything 24/7. Yes?
Yeah.
So all the information from everything going on within that's detectable to us is recorded. So there's an awful lot of information registered in there. that we may only be able to access through dowsing? And is it possible that some dowsers only access that information in their head, whereas other dowsers are more capable of jumping past that and out of their energy field, and accessing information in a different place?
Yeah, again, I say there are different types of people and they have different abilities, the way you're describing. And often, and you heard you talk sometimes in the past, your abilities astound me. I don't have a lot of, well, I have abilities, but if I don't use them, I don't stay familiar with using them. I have done astral traveling, but not deliberately very much. And I've done a few things. I do an awful lot of dream therapy. But one thing that struck me is that there's very few people have had a near-birth experience, and I feel I'm privileged to be one of them. Now, by a near-birth experience, I remember being at about 10 feet off the ground at the farmyard where my newlywed parents were, looking at them saying, I'm going to get to know them, I'm going to get to know them. And the next moment, I was in the birth canal being birthed. And I can remember that. So that's a near-birth experience and an actual birth experience. But I have done regression to many other lifetimes. And I tend not to do it so much these days because I'm so much more efficient with my pendulum to find the bits I need to find without going into the actual event. Now, I'm on Earth lifetime about 214 at the moment. And before that, I came from another planet. So I have a history of what the solar system was like before it was terribly interrupted and disturbed and changed, and the Earth was produced as a consequence. And I was amongst the people that caused that to happen. So I have a history, and I go back to another planet called Abzu in another constellation altogether. But that's just me. Everybody's not the same. Everybody's got their own. I can spend hours talking on that one subject alone, and it wouldn't be easy for people to follow because they're trying to stitch it to their own frame of reference. But everybody's got their own history, and everybody, that is, those that reincarnate, have their own history. Now, those that don't reincarnate, the spirit part or element of the body itself does get reused, recycled. So I've healed people that don't reincarnate from problems they've inherited from the body that their spirit previously had, without them as a person reincarnating. So you've got to decide, well, if some people reincarnate and some people don't, what is it about the spirit that makes somebody a person or a unique person? And it's not the physical body. And the whole thing gets quite deep, and you can go off on all sorts of tangents and talk about. I mean, if anyone wants to take anything away today, go and ask, you know, what is a person and what am I? Where do I come from? It's a tough one. It's a tough one because you won't always get the answers you want.
This is true. Okay. Yeah, there's lots of questions I could ask on that one, but I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, but any time, I mean, anyone can fire anything at me. Just don't necessarily expect to hear something that fits with you, because my frame of reference is so out from anyone I know. My answers often don't make sense to people, but they make sense to me. Sorry, folks.
Unless you can kind of get confirmation, I find it all personally, okay, if I can't get confirmation with other people about what I'm doing, what I'm seeing, get them to see it, get them to feel it, actually have a noticeable effect, then I kind of put it down to my imagination.
Yeah, but if I've been able to use my technique to solve somebody's impossible health problem and they recover, then I take comfort from the fact that I've healed somebody of something which was impossible without ever meeting the person, only by hearing about them. And I get spirit permission to do it, by the way.
It depends on what you class as impossible. A lot of the time people think that they can't heal, so they don't. But if they meet someone that can convince them that they can,
yes,
they do.
Yeah.
And the person may not have actually done anything, right? Other than convince the person that they can heal. So there's a, it's a big kind of I'm going to ask a few people here. It's like people saying that they balance chakras and heal people, right? Because the chakras don't actually exist. But because the person has actually believed that they have been healed through having their chakra balanced, they will get better.
Yeah. Yeah, but the people I'm dealing with don't know they've been healed. So they can't, that effect can't work. I've treated a young girl for Canavan disease, for example. Who's heard of Canavan disease? We're talking about rare diseases.
Not heard of that one.
No. These things crop up, I just saw a poster somewhere, some local couple had got a baby with this very rare disease. They wanted crowdfunding to go to America for treatment that wouldn't work at great expense. And I looked into it and took the machine to pieces, saw what was wrong and put it right. And it'll take years for that to be proven, but we're working on it. Lots and lots of conditions like that. I put it this way.
A lot of these conditions are simply because the person's frequency is wrong.
Because what?
So the frequency is wrong. Or they might have I forgot the whole aura, but there's a little bit in that bit of the aura clipping into the body. The frequency is wrong.
Okay.
You can get that, right? That's quite common. If you put that frequency right, you don't need to tell the person. And if you can get it to fix, and they are not on a kind of magic roundabout where they just keep going round and recreating it, then fix that and it's gone. I don't really need to know any more than that. I don't need to know
that's
what's
working,
caused it. It does, yeah.
Yeah, if that's working, then it's fine. I've no truck with it. It's down to everyone's own approach to the subject.
I have more problem kicking people off their merry-go-round of self-destruction than I do putting the energy right.
Yeah.
What is caravan disease?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It'll be a variety of motor neuron, probably, in that sort of area of the development that isn't working in a youngster from birth on. I'll throw this out to you folks because this is an interesting subject we're on now, and without being able to use my own terminology, it's very difficult to explain. But there is a spiritual aspect to the way our body is built that will build our body from birth. But from birth, our spirit, or that part of the spirit that builds our body, isn't present because the mother spirit does it.
Yeah.
So where an ailment comes from our own spirit's damage, the baby will be born according to the mother's spiritual health, which generally is fairly good. So a baby can be born well and within the first 3 or 4 years of life develop one or another impossibly difficult to diagnose weird condition with all sorts of weird and wonderful names, and the medical profession don't really know what's caused it or how to fix it. They just learn how to treat the symptoms as best they can. Now, what's happened in my view is that at the moment of birth, we transfer then from the spirit of the mother as the baby's born, and the baby's own spirit then takes over the body. So if a baby's born healthy, and if the spirit is unhealthy, the body will develop that ill health from then on. But people don't know that, so they can't understand that, if you follow me. And if they don't know how the spirit can be damaged or how to mend it, they won't know how to heal the condition. Because they won't know what the condition is. So what? There's a whole range.
The condition will be the frequency is wrong.
Well, take motor neuron. Motor neuron. Can you just change the frequency on a motor neuron patient and say, "Oh, you're going to be fine now"?
You get them to rejig their mental process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Stop eating the foods that will be causing some of it.
Yeah.
Introduce foods that can rebuild the body rather than them being lacking, and then change the frequency back to how it should be, and you stand a high chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if that's working for you, as I say, everyone has their own modality, and I don't want to change how you see it. And people ask me, how do I see it? And I'm just passing it on.
I'm just trying to get information out of you. That's all.
Well, Martin, with that, just run that past us again with regards to the spirit of the mother and the spirit of the child. The child can take on the mother's spirit. Is that what you were saying?
Okay, let's go a bit further. We'll go a bit more deeply into it. Bioplasma. The body is the flesh body is built on a bioplasma or plasmic image of the body, and whatever that bioplasma dictates the body to be is what will be made. And the mother will grow the baby on behalf of the owner of that body with her bioplasmic toolbox, if you like, of fault-free. But once the baby's born, it's the baby's own spirit that moves into that body. Even though the baby's aware of the body from the moment of conception, it isn't in control of building of the fabric of the body. The mother's in charge of that. When the baby's born, the incumbent's own spirit then takes over management of the health of the body. And from that point, any problem with that person's spiritual image will begin to manifest in illness in the child as it grows. Motor neuron is a classic one. And all sorts of fibrosis as well.
Sorry, I think you've just answered the question that was forming. So you're saying that a baby would have a spirit all the way through gestation.
Yes.
But it wasn't actually managing its own growth.
Yes.
Right. So it's there, but not.
Yeah.
So where are you with guardian angels, or what Patrick McManaway would call a companion angel?
Well, there's a whole area there of what you think an angel is, for a start, but we'll leave that for a minute. In my way of seeing how things are constructed, the people that reincarnate, I call them individuals. Yeah. And individuals are one of a pair. We're all created as a couple. So everyone that's an individual has a twin flame. Mm. And the twin flame is their counterpart. And from when they started coming into atomic reality back in prehistory, beyond the imagination, those two would look out for each other. They would experiment with working in the atomic world and energies as a spirit, and they're a couple. And they'd work with others as well, but essentially each one is a couple. That's your twin flame. So people talk about twin flames, and guardian angels can often be the same thing. Oh. Yeah.
Sorry, Martin, is there a particular book that this comes from?
No, it comes out of my head. Sorry.
Well, I've heard this before from other sources and books. So.
Yeah, twin flames are talked about elsewhere. Yes.
Yeah. So what makes you think that it's original to your thinking?
It's only that where I think the twin flames come from is my original thinking.
Well, okay.
Not that they are twin flames. I beg your pardon. So when we talk about angels and guardian angels, I don't propose to be or purport to be an expert on the subject, but I suspect often we're talking about twin flames.
Interesting. Not
always, because there are spirits that are attached to others for karmic reasons, and they're around, and they're also for family reasons, and want to stay around to help each other when they're deceased, if they don't pass over properly. If people don't know they've died, or they choose not to pass over because they want to be with loved ones, there's all sorts of ways that they can mess up the system. And there's been a number of cases. Sorry?
I think we're really good at doing that all by ourselves. I don't think we need much help from spirits.
No. One thing I've had to do from time to time is when there's been a deceased person who's been a reincarnating type who hasn't passed over for technical reasons, or they haven't realized they've died. And sometimes you have to go into your mind and telepathically speak with them and guide them over. That's quite not common, but it's not unusual. A friend of mine who was very ill over in North Wales a few years ago was eventually sectioned and locked up. And he was quite sane. You could talk to him about all sorts of things. But the system around him didn't believe that, and they locked him up and they deprived him of television and this, that, and the other until he just wanted to die.
Yeah.
But one day he went off astral traveling in a dream because he didn't know he was doing it. And while he was away, his body had died or had moved, and he couldn't get back into it, and he died. And I went to his funeral, and he was there at his funeral, not realizing he died. You with me? Because he doesn't remember dying. He went off somewhere and came back, and then he was lost. He's lost somewhere. Now, it's not his consciousness that's lost, it's his awareness that's lost. But he wasn't aware that he was here, and he should have been somewhere else because he wasn't aware that he died. Many, many years ago, I was at work, 35, 40 years ago, a secretary came to me. She said, Martin, I know you think about different things and spirit things. She said, perhaps you can help. She said, my young baby boy is about 2.5 years old. I put him to bed at night and he screams his head off and cries. I go, and every time I go and ask him what's wrong, he said, it's the man on the horse. And she described this man on this horse. So I immediately went into a quiet space at work and said, what's going on then? And this voice said into my head, and who wants to know? And this guy was on royal business with the crown, riding on his horseback with guards either side of him, carrying a message from North Derbyshire down to London for the king. He was ambushed in Littleover and murdered. And he didn't know he was dead. He didn't know he was dead. And he was still sitting on his horse in his mind. And since then, her house had been built there. And he was sitting he appeared every night to this boy in the bedroom. Until I spoke to the man and said, well, what year is it? He told me the year, and he told me a few things when we got talking. I said, do you realize I'm talking to you from like 1989 or 1991 or something? And you could see the penny drop in his mind. And eventually I got an image of a man on a horse, and flames from the bottom just went up to the top, and he vanished as he passed over. The girl and the boy never had the problem again. And 6 weeks later, she came running to me with a cutting out of the local newspaper that described the very incident that happened in history of the murder, where the house was. So some reporter had actually proved it as well. But that's what I'm getting at. It's you never really know. So if somebody's not passed over, you've got those sorts of spirits lingering about as well that don't know they've passed over.
This is true, but not everybody can access that. It all depends on what frequency they are. And sometimes people sleep in these little portals that take them up to the right frequency, and then they end up being able to do it even though they're not really rigged for it.
Yeah,
but that is a fascinating subject for sure.
Yeah,
and
it is.
Yeah, definitely real, because I've seen, enough of bits like that. It's not something that I specialise in, I have to say. I tend to stay more into the here and now and getting people's frequency right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes definitely needs dealing with.
Yeah. But I've probably said too much already.
Well, I get that quite often. Don't worry.
Well, it's a very nice, it's a very, very kind of you sharing all of that. Indeed, a lot to ponder, certainly. Yeah. When I met you before, Martin, it was you were at a time. I hope you don't mind me speaking about it.
No, go on.
4 or 5 years ago, and you were looking into aspects of Metatron.
Metatron.
Yes.
Yes.
And very, very detailed diagram you showed me about the. I can't remember exactly what it was, but if you wanted to expand on that, that would be maybe some would find that quite interesting, I'm sure.
Yeah, this is more of a science lesson now, and it's going to seem a bit difficult in only a few words to say. So in the work I do, I'm working mostly with subatomic physics, and I layer it up in dimensions from 1 to 6. So as far as I'm concerned, I live in a 6-dimensional universe. Now, there are spheres and spheres and spheres, lots of things, a bit like a Mandelbrot pattern of things going on inside each other in ever increasing number. And we're down there in one of those dots somewhere. And the box, if you like, or the sphere that an individual resides in, I call an individual domain. And that is 3-dimensional in nature. And it has a 3-dimensional mind. And that mind, for me, is Metatron. Because in every pairing of twin flames, there are 2 sides. I'm the lower of the 2 sides. My 3-dimensional wholeness is Metatron. My twin flames will be metanoia. So everyone's got a Metatron or a metanoia, if that makes sense. It's a mind I can talk to. I don't have a conversation with it, but it can do things for me when I'm doing my own self-healing. Quite a limited number of things it can do. There are lots more parts of mind that I'm made of. A lot of them are 4-dimensional, some are 5, some are 6, but most are 4-dimensional. The 3-dimensional bit that encompasses all of who I am as an individual is Metatron, the name of the mind. So when I want to talk to Metatron, I'll say, I want to talk to Metatron. I'll call up Metatron, and Metatron will come to me.
Do you not feel that you are communicating with your own soul, your own spirit?
Well, it is part of me, yes.
Yes, it's back to this thing where I say some people are kind of stuck in a box in their head and they can't communicate with their soul. So that's just a different name for that, is it?
No, I'm not sure how you're seeing it, you see. Like I said before, it's the way I see it. The question was, who do I think, or what do I think Metatron is? And it's a 3-dimensional plane, if you like. No, it's a domain. It's a 3-dimensional object that everything else that I'm made of is inside of. There are other 3-dimensional levels inside that in smaller packets. There's a mentee, a group of a mentee. There are different names for different groups. But Metatron is the main one over all of me. It's too big a science to try and explain better without a lot of pre-work and what different concepts of things are to get down to what I mean by Metatron. But the question
You
was,
say it's a science, but is it actually a belief rather than a science? Because science is, you know, you can record it and document it and prove it. And
a belief is something that you can't verify. That I mean, you're right. It's partly belief, but I call it a science because I'm using actual subatomic particle names and how they relate to each other and how they create and how they evolve, how they produce monatomic atoms and binding atoms, and how it all I mean, we are not separate from that. Everything, we are part of all of it. So I have to include all of it.
Well, that to me is just kind of, if someone didn't quite, please excuse me, I'm really blunt and brutal, okay? But
yeah,
when people can't actually understand something fully, they will go to get big names off of quantum physics or quantum mechanics and use all these great big words and put them in some sort of almost sane order to totally baffle the people that you're talking to, because they don't really understand it themselves and they can't prove it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. You're picking up on the idea of belief. I say belief is a substitute for knowing. Most people use belief because they don't know, or they're not been told. You don't know something because you're told it. You know it because you've worked it within yourself and you're familiar with it. That's when you know something. You know, if as a child you're told the flame is hot, well, they say it's hot. Well, I don't know. Put your finger in the candle flame and burn your finger. Now you know what hot means. You now know. It becomes a knowledge. Yeah. Now, I don't know what I'm describing to you, but the times I get a positive result from applying this knowledge that I've slowly built up gives me confirmation that this has some meaning and it's working. You with me? Yes, it could be all make-believe, and it is only my way of describing it to my mind. I'll agree with that. But because I'm getting results from how it works and how it comes together, I have to give it more credence than just a bit of mere belief and fantasy. But I do agree.
Are you sure you're not overcomplicating it? Because really the simple, the simple stuff works the best. And if it's simple enough to explain to other people, that's going to work even better. But I mean, I don't study it. I follow quantum physics and mechanics because I find it interesting. I can't remember the names of all the stuff and my mind doesn't work that way. But I just kind of grasp the bigger picture. But it seems to me you're talking about the picture of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, you know, the way everything's made up. But in the end, it is they can't even quantify an electron or a proton. They just describe it now as a cloud of vibration.
But they don't know what they mean by vibration either.
Well, it's a vibration, yes. No, but they don't even give it a physical shape. They just give it the name of, they call it a cloud of vibration because it has no actual physicality to it. And so everything is made up of that.
Yeah. So
and so we're just some sort of vibration creating the illusion that we see.
Yeah.
And magnetic repulsion and kind of you get touch and visible light bounces off something, which is mostly the magnetic field in between the particles, because we're 1% particle and the rest is just magnetic fields. So basically we don't really exist, and those particles aren't really particles at all. They're just clouds of vibration. So why, why go into naming all the different bits when you can't really get your head around that unless you are programmed into understanding that particular way of thinking? or understanding, and that understanding might change again next week.
Well, my research is, sorry, carry on.
No, go on.
Well, what I've been looking at is that all of physics and what we call the known world is what our physicists tell us they've measured. They tell us they've found these things, and they look at everything from a material point of view. It's subatomic, it has a spin, it has a magnetic, or it has electric, or it's whatever. No one ever talks about the awareness that it has, the temporal properties that it has. If I look at my way of seeing how things are developed, I come across subatomic particles that appear many times throughout creation. So does it keep creating the same particle? No, it creates something which has the same behavioral characteristics. And it's the behavioral characteristics of a particle that come from the temporal aspects of it, which is related to its awareness and its programming. And programming comes into it. So when I see two particles of a different type interact in a fusion and produce something else, it's we go back to the word intelligence again, it's the awareness and the mental aspect that scientists can't see that makes that happen. So they're only seeing half of the story. Now, in my defining to myself how creation works, I've worked out how galaxies are formed. And I've worked out that there are many galaxies much, much older than our galaxy. So what is this idea of a Big Bang? And so each galaxy has its own Big Bang in its own stage of development once it gets to the atomic level. And they've been looking at these new new telescopes in space, and they said at Christmas, the latest telescope has just been able to look far, far, far out, further out into history, into space than we ever thought possible. So we've looked out to the distance, which should be where the universe began in time. So we look there, and that time distance we're looking across should show us something that happened around the time of the Big Bang. And what we're seeing is highly developed galaxies that are much more developed and much older than our own. That completely defies the physics brains now. They're frying their brains trying to work that one out, because those galaxies are much older than ours. The whole idea there was a Big Bang for everyone is a fallacy, and they don't know what it means. That's just one example where I get feedback from the real physics measurements at the moment that support my view of how things are built, without going into what that is.
Unless, of course, light is going round in a loop.
Unless light is going around in a loop, yeah.
Yeah.
That's if light exists.
All of those galaxies are no longer existent because, the light took such a long time to get here that they've actually long time ago disappeared, and kind of, it all gets really...
But you're observing them in the state they were in when the light left them.
Yes. To some extent, well, some things do have an effect on light.
Yeah.
And so there is some sort of distortion.
Yeah. Things that have come out of my research which surprise me are things like orbits of planets developed before the planets developed on them. The planets developed on orbits before the suns developed in the middle, which physicists will tell you the reverse is how creation developed. I'm finding the opposite. And part of what is our deep mental structure goes back to these planes of orbits and shapes of orbits that planets grew on. It's a very interactive wholeness of everything growing together. I can't describe it. I mean, it's taken me 20 years to get this far. I can't give it you in an hour without diagrams. And even then it would take me probably 6 months.
Well, unless, of course, a consciousness was creating it.
Well, if anyone can pick up on...
You think something into existence, the thought would have to be first, and then the creation would come after.
Yeah, so I calibrate myself against what the scientific world tells me they've measured. That's all I can do.
Well, if you're totally reliant on stuff that you've read, then yes. But that again is getting out of that.
Yeah. Well, I've read very little, and a large amount of what I've done has come from my own research. And it's taken a long time. Like I say, it's like building a huge jigsaw up where every piece is white, and you don't know where it all fits, and it just takes a while. And your mind goes round, well, if that's that, and every few minutes you come up with, well, what if that is that, then that is that. I need to think about something else now. And
I've had exactly the same problem. I've kind of realised that I could see these, what I now know is the sound of things, but it's taken me 20 odd years to get round to understanding that fully.
Yeah.
And I think sound is far more important in the creation of everything than some people would like to believe.
Yeah.
All the way down to science, the study by, is it some German people with the DNA strands, they are saying that you can actually relate musical notes to the different aspects of the DNA, and the DNA will actually play a tune.
Yeah.
A really complicated, not just a tune, more like an orchestral.
Yes.
Which creates us.
Yeah.
So all depending on how you want to look at it is
you've picked on another you've picked another pimple on me there when we talk about DNA. The scientific world seems to think the DNA defines the body, and if you get the DNA right, the body will be right. In my view, the DNA is malleable, and actually tunes itself to the frequencies, if you like, if you want to use frequencies, the energies of the spirit body that it belongs to. So in order for the organs of the spirit to communicate with the cells, then the DNA must attune to that spirit. But if the spirit was to modify, the DNA would be modified accordingly, even during the same lifetime. So the DNA isn't the cause, it's a measure of how things are.
Well, it seems that, yeah, we can adjust DNA, apparently.
Yeah, but are we sure we know what we're doing?
Through dowsing as well. No, of course we don't know what we're doing. We're just making it up as we go and hope for the best.
Yeah.
It's just, yes. And if we live through it, then we've done good.
Just one, time's going on, gents, and just not too long before we're going to finish tonight, finishing at 8:30 tonight.
Yeah.
You spoke a little bit, Martin, earlier on, just about God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, do you want to, or would you share your sort of viewpoint on God? And
it's a very, I can do, but I suspect I might make more enemies than friends. The whole of creation is something which has a temporal aspect to it, and so our whole galaxy does. And some might argue that somewhere along the line there is a temporal entity that, or an awareness entity that created all of this universe or created this galaxy, and that must be what we emotively want to call God. Now, when you come down to how we appeared on the earth, I have my own very definite opinions, which can be very strongly challenged by those who have different opinions. It's quite a story, and it can be read in detail if you want to read Zachariah Sitchin's books, because he's got a good handle on it. Or there's a very good book called The Genius of the Few, but it's hard to get hold of, The Genius of the Few. And that describes the digging up of artifacts in Mesopotamia and South America and elsewhere that show there's been civilizations here before what we call our civilization. And my regression work takes me back to when the Earth didn't exist, when we had a different arrangement of planets in the solar system that were damaged by aliens, and I was one of them, although not the perpetrator of the crime, that damaged and killed life on Neptune, destroyed life on Mars, destroyed life on Venus, and I've been healing Venus, by the way, and destroying life on Tiamat. Now, Tiamat was another big planet, and the planet itself wasn't killed. About a third of it was blown away, and it's now the asteroid belt. And in order to try and salvage the situation, those same people took away about a third or a half of the Earth's core, of that Tiamat's core, to make it smaller, that they could wrap the mantle round it and reform a smaller planet, which they then moved into the orbit the Earth has now, and that is the Earth. So the Earth is both young, made hundreds of thousands of years ago, as religious people believe, and it's also very ancient, as the rocks prove, because it's both. It's a planet before Earth, and now it is Earth. And it was allowed to settle as Earth. And by the way, much later, other aliens, for reasons of producing energy they wanted to take away, moved the remainder of the core of Tiamat, which was a blob that had frozen in the asteroid belt, up to the Earth, and that's our moon. So the moon is actually a part of the Earth's core, historically speaking. Now, those aliens, once the Earth had settled, and they'd been living out on Pluto and other outer planets for a long, long time, moved back to Earth, which is what the Sitchin books will tell you about. And they developed their own culture, and there's a reason why they did it, but I won't go into it now. But after a while, they realized they needed a workforce. So they manufactured out of the native animals the form which you and I have now, we call human beings, in order to serve them. And they were the gods. So the first idea of what God is or God was that mankind had was these aliens. They were the gods, plural. And different cultures have different names for them, but they're basically the same bunch of people, same bunch of gods. They were known as the Anunnaki, and they were an offshoot of another group called the Elohim. But the Elohim together, people who've studied this will also know of the Nephilim, who were Martians amongst them, Martians that had been saved. And so they were the essence of what we call the gods. And the rest of it were developed like animals, but intelligent and able to speak. So they would have taken Neanderthal man, given it 6 million years of development in about 4 or 5 years into what we are today. So historically, they'll tell you that the paleontologists will tell you there's a missing gap. How did we get from Neanderthal to this in apparently no time at all? Which because we were engineered so. Now, it's a complicated story, and I hope this doesn't leave you too out in the woods here. They knew about spirit, and they wanted to make these creatures have a spirit that they would be connected to. And one of their own had been sentenced to death for reasons I won't go into, and left on Mars. And so being on Mars, they knew there was a spirit there of their own type. They could attach these creatures on Earth to that spirit, and he would be their God. So the God the Christians think of as God is that one. I know his name. I used to know him as a person when I was there then, but not now. And so he is the Christian God. And he is the only God that I've come across who actually, for historic reasons I won't go into, has consciousness. So he is the only one who's actually able to listen to his flock and do something about it. Any other God is just not there, not listening. And there are lots of other gods, but they're not able to respond. So that's where the first God came in. Since then, one or two others have developed of a similar ilk, more or less through a fluke of nature and through people being damaged have ended up that way. What they did not realize was the spirit of real humans, the ones that do reincarnate, that were still attached to the planet because they'd existed on Tiamat, the previous planet, in a different form, but they were still humans, were still attached to the planet. And so because these bodies are now incarnating that are compatible, reincarnating people moved into them. but they were brought up with an education system and a religious system that doesn't recognize that. And so they've all been brought up to believe in whatever religion they're brought up to believe in, and to worship whatever God they're told to worship, even though for them it isn't appropriate, because they are their own God, the God being the higher spiritual aspect. So everyone who reincarnates as their own higher spiritual aspect is therefore technically their own God. Whereas the people that don't reincarnate do have a real God, in the sense of there's an entity there that they're all connected to. Is that, does that sink in? Just answer the question. I don't know. Not a simple answer. Not a simple answer.
I understood what you said, but I can't say that it resonates with me.
Fine. That's okay.
So I shan't be buying your book on it when you release it.
Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry. I said this was a very, contentious subject. But I was asked the question, so that's the best I can give you.
Thank you.
Now you can see why not many people talk to me.
We've been talking to you for the last hour and a half.
Yeah.
Martin.
You're just trying to decide in what way you don't really, we're trying to find a reason not to want to talk to me again. Well, it's all right, I'm being facetious.
I am guilty of kind of quizzing people in the way that I have been.
No, don't worry.
And I do that because some people are reluctant to give us the information.
Yeah.
And you have given us lots of information that we can now mull over. In that respect, it has been what I would say a very successful discussion.
Well, thank you. And I didn't expect to be in the hot seat, by the way. I'm just like you. I sat in front of the screen and it just happened.
Well, you've done very well, so thank you very much for all your insightful, well, more than insightful, but thanks. There's a lot for us to muse and take in, certainly.
What I'd like people who douse to do is go away and douse the points I've raised and say, well, what does it mean to them? As well, do I resonate with this? Not just in your head, but go douse it, ask some real questions and build your own image up from that. See where it takes you. But that's all I did.
Martin, do you use any charts or just yes and no?
Yes and no. If I've done some healing and I want to measure over the days or months how someone's recovering, I will perhaps do it in percentages and say what percentage has this gone down, or is this person healed, or whatever. A lot of feedback I get is dreams. I get dreams, write them down, and then I douse the interpretation, which 99.9% of the time is nothing like what I thought the dream was about. So never ever dream something and think you know what it means, is my advice. Douse what the dream means. So first of all, whose dream is this? For example, if somebody has a dream and they include me in the players in their dream, I will see the dream. So just because I get a dream doesn't make it my dream. And if I've healed somebody, I might be picking up on the mind of the healed person that my mind is watching, and I'll pick up their dream of their healing. So lots of things, and I learn a lot that way, because very often it'll tell me what the next problem is that the person needs to deal with. So I do a lot of dream work. It's quite tedious.
Do you have a website, Martin? Or
I've made one, but I made it about 15 years ago. It's one page of gobbledygook that says one day this will be a website, just to reserve it. And it's called Thymiatry. Thy, I can't even say it now, A-T-R-Y, Thymiatry. T-H-Y-M-I-T-A-R.
T-H-Y-M?
Yeah. It stands for, I've even forgotten now. It's to do with methods for healing yourself, using temporal reconstruction of yourself, but The actual wording is that long ago, I can't remember now. So if I was to train people, they would be thymiatric practitioners. So the science I call thymiatry.
Anything to do with the thymus gland?
No, it comes from two Greek words to do with the mind and healing. Thymia and iatry, which I looked up at the time, and I thought, well, I'll join them together and make thymiatry. So I've got that name as a website to save it, but I'm not broadcasting it too much. I don't want other people to nick the name.
So how do we get in touch with you?
Well, you can send me emails if you like, if you want to contact me. Martin, that's an I, Martin, at spalt.uk.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we look forward to seeing you the next one, Martin.
I'll try and be here if I can. There's always family dragging me off one way or another. 3 boys rebuilding houses take a fair bit of DIY time.
Okay, well, thanks for your input. It's been really, really good. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And thanks everybody for coming. I know George said we're going to probably go till about 8:30, and we're almost there now.
Yeah.
I haven't said hello to everybody here today. I know Maeve has come from a long way tonight in Spain.
Hi, Maeve.
Pam,
Hi.
where are you from, Pam?
I'm from Cheshire.
Cheshire, okay.
Yes.
Wow. And Suzanne comes from Sweden. Hi, Suzanne.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You're the furthest, are you? Probably the furthest. Yeah. Last time I spoke to Suzanne, it was minus 18 degrees C. What's it like today?
Sorry, I didn't hear your question, Richard.
Last time I spoke to you, it was minus 18.
Minus 18?
Yeah.
Okay, that's very cold.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have here in Sweden, we had 2 degrees Celsius earlier today, but I think now it's on 0 or something, -1, something.
That's warming up for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll catch up with you again, Suzanne, because Suzanne got quite an interesting story about crystal healing courses she's been on. We'll maybe discuss that another time. But thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for hosting, George.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thanks to everybody, and we'll look forward to catching up with you all next month, hopefully.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, George.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.